estimated that the rail system in the United States is responsible for moving about 10 billion tons of goods and products each year. The rail system in the U.S. and other countries is gone digital, with very few human operators on board. This, of course, makes the system a lot more efficient. What if something happens to one or more of the trains? In September 2023, Norfolk Southern, which primarily operates in the Mid-Atlantic region of the United States, had to park most, if not all, of its cargo trains along its 20,000 miles of track for one day. The computer outage was not a hack of the system, but rather a software flaw that had been propagated through the network. Fixing that took several days and cost the company hundreds of thousands of dollars. Also reported in September 2023, 20 trains came to a complete stop in their tracks in Poland. This time, it was the work of criminal hackers who used off-the-shelf radio equipment costing no more than $30 to send a radio stop command over the unencrypted and unauthenticated communication system. These two events call attention to the fact that the rail system is vulnerable to software errors and unauthenticated commands. Is the reason why we need to focus on critical infrastructure today before something more catastrophic happens tomorrow. This is a story about how 70% of our critical infrastructure is in the hands of private companies and why we need to secure the OT systems of our rail, gas, and water pipelines today. I'm Robert Vamosi. This is Error Code. Hey, it's Robert, host of the show. And first, I want to thank you, my loyal audience. The engagement on Error Code in the first 25 episodes, it's been off the charts. Clearly, there's a need for more IoT and OT content. With that, I've actually decided to start 2024 in search of a new product marketing job in IoT or OT security. Yes, this CISSP, an award-winning journalist, is officially on the market. So I wanted to reach out to you, my listeners of this podcast, to see if you might know of any product marketing opportunities where you work. Perhaps you might even be eligible for a referral fee, if the job is right. You can find my full work experience on LinkedIn, and you can reach out to me directly there, or you can go to robert@errorcodepodcast.com. That's all one word, robert@errorcodepodcast.com, and email me. Or you can find me on Mastodon. Even if you don't know of any jobs, I would be open to meeting you and getting any feedback you might have. Okay, that's enough about me. Now, let's get back to the show. 5, 4, 3.
Hello, I'm Christopher Warner, Senior Security Consultant for our OT practice at GuidePoint Security. At GuidePoint Security, we started a practice for the operational technology and the industrial control system space, where we actually concentrate on not only threat and attack simulation, but the governance and risk management and compliance services, where we can go into any type of organization and assess their OT environment, as well as the associated IT systems that typically, and as we move forward with technology, that a lot of the IT systems are now controlling, because as more of the OT devices become smarter, provide better data, we can have businesses be more efficient as they use those IT systems. And a lot of folks are calling it IT and OT convergence. But GuidePoint, being a leader in cybersecurity, has invested heavily in myself and another gentleman, Pascal Ackerman. He just got ranked. He has the third best industrial control systems book out there right now on the market. So he and I has teamed up to roll out our practice. And I'll say, since it started, it's been a great adventure, and we're really helping a lot of organizations.
Whether or not you agree with the word convergence, something's going on between OT and IT. How is it different from IIoT or Industrial Internet of Things?
Sure. And I'm glad you bring that up, because there's a lot of things that I'm not sure if I like to call it the convergence part, because if there ever was a an air gap there if it ever existed. And of course, it depends on which critical infrastructure you're talking about, or 16 critical infrastructures or business verticals. And they all have their own type of language. As a matter of fact, OT is even though I've been in this space for 30 years, OT is a word I just not sure if I care for or not. Just seems a little high level. And of course, a lot of that was the IoT push for our plug and play devices that we see mainly in our homes. But really, the meat, the heavy aspect to these operational technology systems and a whole is the industrial control systems or cyber physical systems, as it's usually stated in energy and utilities.
Yeah, the difficulty here is that the devices are sometimes in the field. And I'm speaking about OT devices that are particularly in the field for years or even decades. And they're not necessarily meant to connect directly to things.
Yes, control systems in general. And it's interesting that you bring that up because some of the new security directives that are being released are mandating that organizations must demonstrate. And as a matter of fact, on rail systems, they need to demonstrate that their OT systems, generally speaking, specifically their control systems, must operate without IT. And that is huge as we, especially for the manufacturing environment, just to compete in the marketplace, you need to have that IT and OT alignment to even have an efficient manufacturing process. You could easily be beat out by someone with a 3D printer in a garage that can take down, larger manufacturing capabilities.
What Chris is saying is like the $30 of radio equipment that stopped the trains in Poland, a simple home device could shut down a manufacturing capabilities in a factory. These systems have to be able to still function if the IT part is compromised or otherwise disabled.
So that's a huge challenge just in itself right there. So the convergence, yes, it's causing a lot of challenges because you have different disciplines. And those disciplines to learn operational technology systems are usually like electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, chemical engineers. So like all the different awesome flavors of engineers. And I was blessed in my career field to be able to work with those folks and learn the different terminologies across all the different verticals. So, so having that convergence and being more efficient and using great technologies is great, but you are expanding the threat landscape. You're opening to more vulnerabilities. And I think that that's why a lot of governance, as well as some of your private specialty groups like NERC, the National Electric Reliability Corporation for the electric utilities, but especially particularly, and I'll roll back to the transportation and rail sector, is that having to demonstrate that your control systems can run without IT is great. It's just the fact that putting all these types of compliance on organizations is just killing the resources. And it's not just financial resources, it's the human resources, because so I think cybersecurity in a whole, I thought I seen a statistic. It's like almost 800% undermanned. So that's just IT cybersecurity. Try to find an OT cybersecurity person is very challenging now because it just takes so many years to get to that point where you can understand how the systems work and how they integrate and work together for the whole organization.
I just want to double down on this. What Chris is talking about is making sure that if the IT fails, software flaw or criminal hack, the OT system, it can still function and function without any IT.
Correct. Some of the critical infrastructure sectors, specifically in rail, I'm seeing that now, and in some of the other verticals are going to be forced to do this, that they have to demonstrate that their systems can operate. So aside from rail, the other one is pipeline. So your closed pipeline would consist, they're calling it closed pipeline. I'll put quotes around closed because that's kind of an inner circle term. But those closed pipelines are your wet and dry gas.
Chris mentioned wet and dry gases, so I asked him to define that a little bit more.
example for that is wet gas is what you fill your car up with. So you go over to 7-Eleven or and a BP or something, Shell, Chevron. You pull in there, you're putting wet gas, gasoline, it derivative from oil. So that's your wet gas, but also is considered oil, like your propane, your uh, oil, and gasoline. That's your wet gas. Dry gas is natural gas, which actually natural gas is probably the safest gas out there. So just because gasoline, if it's spilled, it's on the ground and it's really there's nowhere to kind of run. Natural gas, you just hit the ground because it burns up instead of down and out. So natural gas is a little bit easier to manage. So you're looking at like LNG, CNG, or natural gas that comes in and does your fireplace. But you're also looking at the petroleum, your JP8 that runs to the airports. You're looking at just heating oil for a lot of places, especially up north in the colder environments. So the new regulations are really pushing, and I believe it's mandated for pipelines as of July 27th. It came into effect that they have to demonstrate that their and control systems can operate if the IT systems become compromised. Now, it doesn't go into that detail of information. All it says is, hey, does your OT stuff, can it run without your IT thing, your IT systems? And they have to demonstrate that. Me, the first thing I raise my hand up and say, well, how do you talk to your control systems? Oh, IT gives us a computer and we plug it in. Well, how do you demonstrate that they can run without? Pipeline and natural gas, since I have, geez, almost 2 decades experience in energy and utilities, but I could see that in natural gas. It's fairly easy to demonstrate because the pneumatic controls take over, and that's your safety.
So there's like different types of fuel that would have different regulations, even though we're all calling them pipelines.
Yes, that is correct. There'll be different regulations for wet gas and dry gas just because they operate different under different environmental conditions. So, for case in point, like an LNG storage plant, you would take dry or natural gas that kind of goes in folks' house. You would liquefy it, put it in a huge storage tank in an area that gets very cold in the winter. That way, no matter what happens, if there's a pipeline break or a technology outage, that they would have that LNG, they could boil it off and backfeed pipelines to get natural gas in to keep folks warm, keep hospitals running, keep their first responders able to keep their facilities up so they can go and do their thing. So it's definitely different systems, but I will say the telemetry is similar from railroad to pipeline, but the control systems are different.
Sometimes, as Chris will explain, those control systems can misinterpret signals from the IT systems. He has an example of that to share.
So, case in point, Y2K, I got a great war story for you. Y2K came out, and I was working in the engineering staff department. I just got hurt in the military, ran over, long story long. Got recruited in energy utilities. It was a natural gas transmission and distribution. And transmission just means across states lines, and distribution is the natural gas that goes to your house, fireplace, cooks your food, things like that. So when they forced all these Y2K updates, and then while they were doing these forced rollouts, when I say they, the IT department, I was in engineering staff and kind of being the crossing guard between IT, engineering, and the field personnel. And they said, you guys will need to have screensavers. Well, I'm not sure if we want a screensaver. You must have a screensaver. Okay, great. So we plugged in the $1,000 IT computer that was issued to us to talk to the $30,000 programmable logic controller, or PLC. Those are the OT or control systems that basically are the master computers that control everything. And we were at a station just doing a little upgrade, just doing our little calibration per, state or utility commission regulations. And all of a sudden, the screensaver kicked on. Boom, killed the PLC. This station happens to feed 12 power plants on the West Coast. I think it measured a small earthquake of what was happening, of how much natural gas was running through this system. The ground shook All of my field guys ran out and started running valves. The pneumatic controls took over, and that PLC was dead. We lost all eyes and ears on that system. So we had to manually put it in place to keep those power plants on. And that right there is a great demonstration. And that was 20 years ago. But that's a great example of why I think that I guess I would say like the government institutions and some of the state legislation under the utility commissions are really pushing for the demonstration of being able to show your control systems will run without those IT systems.
I know the Biden-Harris National Cybersecurity Strategy came out earlier this year, and I've heard different things about the inclusion of OT. And if you want to learn more about the Biden-Harris National Cybersecurity Strategy, you might want to listen to episode 12 of Error Code, where I talked with Danielle Jablansky from Nozomi Networks about how it relates to OT security in particular. Some people welcome the fact that it's there and isn't prescribed so that industry can rise to that level. And others are saying, well, they really wanted to see more granularity.
Yes, and that's challenging from the federal level down because there's the different. I always divide them up because really the only way to make sense of it for me is the 16 critical infrastructures that make up every business. It doesn't matter transportation, business, even if it's retail stores, your railway, energy utilities, and so on and so forth. But each one of those, the systems are completely different. The terminology is completely different. So when they force one vertical manufacturing to do this one thing, to say, hey, we need you to demonstrate that you can make this widget, or you can produce this food, you can bottle this milk, you can make this baby formula, but you have to demonstrate it with not using IT. Well, unfortunately, a lot of manufacturing plants, their manufacturing plants may be about 60% IT and 40% OT. So that's one example. So they have to make them very, I don't want to say bland, but it has to be generalized to be able to adapt across the board. One item that caught my eye, and this goes to the current administration's release of things, and I'm very excited about this, is called the Cybersecurity Performance Goals. And since so many organizations are they're in their infancy and their security journey, it's a great, actually, that's a nice way of putting where they stand in their security posture today. Generally speaking, for most organizations, is they just need to put a stake in the ground and start. And these CPGs, as they're called, the cybersecurity performance goals, are those is a great tool to start off with because it helps you identify your low hanging fruit, both OT and IT, and it works across all critical infrastructures.
Chris mentioned that the local utilities have some say, and then, there's the federal regulations, but it's not quite as coordinated as it could be.
No, not particularly. And that's one of the things that's challenging because not only is it hard to pick a framework and align to just to actually put in good security, it's always the worry of meeting compliance. So the resources in that particular organization goes to compliance and not necessarily to security or business resilience.
What about some of the guidance from NIST? There's a NIST cybersecurity framework.
Glad you said that. The cybersecurity performance goals feeds right up to it. As a matter of fact, the NIST cybersecurity framework or the NIST CSF, basically the CPGs are a baby of that. Matter of fact, I'm doing a couple projects for that right now, and I was, I was initially like, okay, this is kind of new offering. These folks understand. Everyone so far that all the clients that we spoke to so far are very excited for it because it's palatable, it's understandable, it's very easy to approach instead of tackling something like a NERC SIP or IEC, the global standard IEC 62443. That's such a heavy lift to start from, and it's overwhelming. So NIST cybersecurity framework, me and tons of my colleagues, not just at GuidePoint, but across the board, because really OT security guys we kind of know all each other. It seems like it's a small world, but we definitely recommend folks start with NIST if they're unsure of what framework and best practices to start with in their security journey.
I wonder if Chris would agree that these new guidelines coming out from the government are more accessible today because there's been partnerships with private industries.
Yes, it's great that the governments, and I'll say, federal, state, local, are really putting out a lot of the material and allowing for enough time for folks to make comments on. And it's very easy to get on a group or a committee to help build out those regulations and in some cases the security directives.
I wanted to talk a little bit about railroads and stuff. One thing that impressed me a couple years ago, I learned that Union Pacific was entirely electric. Digital. It's like they don't have as many people on the trains. Everything's controlled remotely.
That's exactly it. They're definitely control systems. They will refer to it in OT in many sense. It just depends on which department you're speaking with in a railroad organization. But yes, they are definitely using operational technology, and it's been out there for a long time. You cross over a railroad track and you see those. The crossbars, the flashing lights. There's sensors up and downstream for depending on what direction the train is moving, and those sensors pick up on that movement. Not only that, there's telemetry, so there's communications going back and forth, whether it's private radio or cellular, and then that way they know to activate the safety measures for a pedestrian crossing, be it vehicle or walking path. So that's just one simple example. Other examples are understanding the basically the train's health and having eyes and ears on it, especially when they go through areas like dark territory and areas in the Southwest and Northwest where the communications may be limited. You would think in today's age that communications everywhere, but there's tons of places, United States, that are still considered dark territory and hard to get communications in. So one thing is great about the railroads is their right-of-way strengths and the right-of-way of, running rail or, like for pipeline industries we were talking about earlier, they have right-of-ways. Well, a lot of the railroads, they'll run fiber optics under and sell those lines. And that's how a lot of the fibers run in and out of cities. So it's great that if they do have the capabilities, and if there is fiber running underneath there, that does help provide some of that communications that's needed for the automation of running railroads. But yeah, back in the day, and I've actually worked with some pipeliner guys and gas corporations that worked on the railroad back in the day, and used to have the cabooses and maybe dating myself because I remember when they had the caboose and the guy waving the flag on the back. But those have been gone. Those are replaced with OT type stuff. But you still have conductors, your train drivers, manning those engines, which is great because if there's any type of loss of systems, that they're able to do manual controls on them.
If there's continuance with OT systems, and you suddenly get into a dark area, it's like you have a runaway train scenario, do you not?
I mean, and there's tons of factors there, but at least there's a human on board.
I understand that in the electrical grid, they use something called the Purdue model, which has 6 layers of security, and it's pretty prescribed in what can happen in each of those layers. So are there things like the Purdue model for the railroad industry?
You brought up the Purdue model, and I know there was a lot of debate over that, and it's interesting. I spent a couple of years at Purdue University, and I was there not that long ago working on their cyber range. They have an awesome live fire cyber range that you can go and test your systems out on. But anyway, the Purdue model is great as a reference, and it's great to articulate how your network is constructed at the different layers, like the OSI layers. But the Purdue model does show how your network is segmented. It'll quickly identify if it's a flat network and susceptible to attack because it's flat. There's no segmentation, and we really push our customers to implement that segmentation so they can isolate certain systems in case another system is attacked, so it doesn't bleed over into the control systems. Because majority of the time, you're not just going to go in and hack an OT system. It's going to come over from the IT system. Even though it'd be easy to get into those control protocols, as more hackers and nation states understand how these OT systems work, then they're figuring out ways to get in, like through vendor updates. So they'll go like whatever OT vendor makes a control system, like a PLC. The vendors will remote in. And a lot of times they remote in an unsecure channel, and they'll find a leak there and can get into the OT side directly. Have not seen that, even though it could be easily done. I haven't seen that as much as I've seen it bleed over from the IT side. So the whole point of having the Purdue model is to be able to articulate what your architecture looks like as of now, and then what it should look like by expanding that into not only just segmenting, but micro segmenting and building enclaves with safe start zones. So if you're totally wiped out, say you have a loss of power, your generators aren't running so great, whatever, you have to do a complete black start, like they call it in the energy sector, and that you can have safe restart zones. Hey guys, I know this system's good to go. Let's bring that one up. Good. Start checking the next one. That one's good to go. Bring that one up. And it's not long to get back online. That resilience, and that's what we need in these organizations. Because you know what? Over 70% of private organizations protect our nation's critical infrastructure, and it's hard for governments to enforce those um, rules or best practices until they come out with mandates to ensure that these private organizations know what they do. But you get into that struggle with compliance, and then where do we get the money and human resources to increase our security postures? So it becomes challenging, but it is doable.
We touched a little bit on pipelines. Is there a lot of similarity between railroads and pipelines, or are pipelines totally a separate thing?
I would say in the telemetry aspect, they can be similar, but other than that, in my opinion, they're completely separate. Um, just because the way that they operate, and that comes from the regulatory entities on how you're supposed to operate and how you demonstrate. So that is completely
So what about the water systems that we have? Are they similar, or are they very different?
similar. Awesome. And I love working with water districts. I just got done helping out one, and I have a really fun time with water because you really want to concentrate on the water quality, and you're allowed to do that because water doesn't really blow up. So just take your natural gas pipeline, the dry gas, or if you take petroleum, your wet gas, you have to deal with all these different type of environments. As a matter of fact, you can't even put a certain control systems unless they have the proper rating that no spark or no type of electromagnetic energy would cause a fire. And you don't obviously have that with water. So you can concentrate on the OT equipment and its metrology, or how it's calibrated to ensure the proper chemicals are in there to clean and then filtered before they're sent out to transmission and distributed into the homes and businesses.
So while it's great that there are sensors and so forth, some of these have been in the field for decades.
Yes, our nation's critical infrastructure needed repaired a couple decades ago at least. Some of the pipes, obviously, we're seeing pipe burst and challenges here and there, but yeah, as a matter of fact, I know of one state in particular where when they used to put in natural gas pipelines, what they would do is take a tree, hollow it out, wrap it with tar, and then that would be your natural gas pipeline. And they just take polyethylene PE pipe and put over that tree, or they'll sometimes try to run it in through the tree. But I do know that there's still gas lines out there that are basically putting gas through trees. Kind of funny, but yeah, you don't see that stuff on the news.
Isn't the tree going to decay over time?
Correct. And that's why they shove polyethylene, that flexible. You'll probably see it along highways if you see that yellow pipe that's round up in a spool. That's polyethylene pipe. And what they'll do is they'll just get a smaller circumference type pipe, or diameter, excuse me, and then just run that through that tree trunk. That way it's safe, but those trunks are still down there. And it really wasn't that long ago that they hadn't replaced the trees with polyethylene. So it's kind of an old school story, and I'm dating myself, but I just thought it was funny in the mid 2000s if that still existed in some areas.
Okay, I'm still questioning this. I'm in an area of the country where the utility ran afoul with the NTSB and others because they were pushing the pressure on the pipelines too high rather than increasing the number of pipelines. It just seems like putting tree trunks and some polyethylene, that's not going to work.
I will say that those tree though that story I told you, there's nothing like that in the Bay Area. And they didn't do that back then because, and that's the same reason they don't bury power lines in the Bay Area is because of earthquakes. So you wouldn't want to do that. And they can push higher pressures of gas because that polyethylene is rated so much higher um, than typically what they're operated at. So just for case in instance, some of those smaller polyethylene pipes can run 100, couple hundred psi. So, and generally, they're probably not even pushing that anyway.
Of the 16 critical infrastructures, I've talked to people about electrical grids, I've talked to people about medical devices. Retail, probably not so much. Are there other systems that we should probably mention?
Well, I know you brought up medical IOMT devices. I know that that's what they call it, and every time I say it, sometimes folks look at me and, what did you say? You mean IoT and or
Yeah.
IIoT, which is used in manufacturing. But IOMT devices. As a matter of fact, I think I was asked to do a quote yesterday on devices that are being resold that are storing privacy data, and they're not being wiped out before they're resold. And now uh, the man let's just shift, just get back to your question. Sorry, I digress, but getting into the manufacturing space. So and it's tough too because we don't get that much attention around manufacturers because we don't really think about everything that we consume, use, eat, anything that we touch, medicine we take, everything's coming off an assembly line. So there are some regulations going into effect, especially to start tightening up the security around our healthcare. Obviously, it is important because there are pacemakers that are being hacked, telemetry systems that are being hacked. So manufacturers, they're shifting a lot of the responsibility from the hospitals, the operators of those equipment, back to the manufacturers to say, hey, manufacturers are required to divulge your vulnerabilities, like they're already doing more so in the energy and utility space. But the manufacturers will need to start working with their customers, like the hospitals and other healthcare services that operate and serve patients with these type of devices. So they're starting to work together. It's a slow process. It needs to get going fast. Um, pretty quick because the largest attacks that we've seen in the last couple of years is ransomware, basically ransoming a manufacturer plant. And I actually got to go through one during COVID 3 years ago, a plant overseas, from one of my clients. And they had to shut the plant down so they didn't spread to the other 82 countries where they had plants. So these plants are being ransomed and they'll be shut down, and you'll have to start building your widget elsewhere, and that may be an extremely important widget, in our supply chain, especially for healthcare or for a food supply.
What about these OT ransomware attacks? I've heard this in a few places, and I'm a bit skeptical. I mean, what is the end goal of such an attack?
Money. It's a financial motivation. So thinking of a nation state attack where you're looking to either destabilize uh, uh, a country or society or destabilize a certain aspect of that society. But for ransomware, the motivation there is the majority of that is financially motivated.
So they're not interested in the data that they can resell. They're physically crippling a plant and taking it offline, threatening to take even more offline unless a ransom is paid.
Correct. That's the majority of the text that we're seeing. However, I put in there is that there's also corporate espionage. So if you're coming out with the latest and greatest, let's say a car, the electric cars are, and I have a very different opinion on electric cars, but um, the just being the first to market and what's the coolest and latest thing being developed. Cell phones is a good example too. So corporate espionage. So you may see some type of attacks, but those usually take place in malware, not ransomware. So the ransomware is the majority of the motivation behind that is financial. There are some political motivations there, but it just doesn't register as much as the financial motivation.
We mentioned electric vehicles, and it's not just the vehicle, there's also the charging stations and things like that, a whole ecosystem.
I'm actually concerned more so, I think, from the general public's understanding of protecting the environment. Yes, the electric car does that, and I know that's completely different than a security discussion, but it puts such a demand on our grid, and we're not ready for it. And 9 times out of 10, that power is being made by a fossil fuel, so you're really not helping the environment out whatsoever. And then plus the batteries and the mining it takes for those cars. I'm all for it. It's easy to produce electricity. You can do it on bike. There's bikes you pedal, generate
Right.
electricity, charge it back up, you're good to go. Some solar, smaller solar. But some of those solar systems are not able to keep up, like we've seen what happened in Texas during that winter storm. So it's just I don't want to say putting the cart before the horse, but we really need to start looking at more efficient power plants and things like that along our grid, and to ensure that our grid has that resiliency and security around those cyber physical systems. And they actually call them CPSs, cyber physical systems, and the electric generation, transmission, and distribution of electric power.
For another take on the security of battery electric vehicles and their charging stations, you might want to listen to episode 13 of Error Code when I talked with Charles Egan of BlackBerry about that.
I don't see much of a concern in the charging stations. Matter of fact, where I live in our housing edition, they do have charging stations, and me being the curious guy that I might go and look at them and stuff like that. I see the ratings on them and stuff, just like I do at gas stations. Because some gas stations, if I don't see that calibration sticker, I just drive off really slowly. but but I don't see. I haven't seen per se vulnerabilities in that space. What I'm seeing is in the car itself, just because, and you're seeing those on gas cars too, just the RFID keys that it's been in the news recently about how easy it is to. Matter of fact, we demonstrated it not that long ago, just going out and with a little device and picking up everything on the car and taking it over and driving it basically from our laptop. We just completely took over the vehicle. So it's a little scary there.
I asked Chris if there was one important takeaway from all of this.
No, I think probably one of the biggest things that's it's exciting for me, but it also keeps me up at night. It's exciting that we're the OT folks, the OT security folks specifically, are finally getting the attention and also starting to get seats into at least presenting to the board level, the B suite and the C suite, the CXOs and so forth, and getting those seats at the table to help those folks understand how to approach security and hardening your systems. For a good example is hardening substations. We've seen substations under attack physically. Of course, that falls outside the cybersecurity realm. Folks say, I say it doesn't, because in order to defend and protect and operate anything, and my military background is going to jump up here, is you need to have eyes and ears on that. You need to know what's out there. What is out there? Know what systems you have out there, inventory those systems, understand what they're vulnerable to. And right there, I mean, right there, you're going to start being ahead of the game right away, because it just starts with basic blocking and blocking fundamentals, blocking and tackling, if you want to use a football term or something. But it starts with those basic fundamentals of just knowing what's out there, eliminating those soft targets, using the technologies. I think it wasn't that long ago I helped a client out, put eyes and ears on some substations that were literally getting attacked every week. and not just putting up bollards. A good example of a bollard is like at Target. They have those huge red balls out front. It just keeps someone from driving a car through there. So that's one aspect. Razor wire at the top. Raising the walls has been my aspect. If you remember the Metcalf situation, I did get, well, what I can say about that, I did get to look at that attack and understand that it was a very sophisticated attack, but it was done by easy means, and really it's a soft target. Take out its communications and you shoot a hole through the oil and cooling system, and it's not going to be long and that substation overheats and you're not going to have enough time to react. If there's sensors on that, or at least some type of physical protection, it's not going to solve the problem. There's just no one fix. What you have to do is defense in depth. And this goes way back to siege strategy. People are thinking that's a new term, defense in depth. The term might be new, tactics old. It's called siege warfare. And, that's the whole reason they built moats and higher walls on castles, is that it allows you enough time to put the right resources in place to protect your systems. So I think that's one of the biggest key takeaways for organizations to start getting that mindset to move forward in their security journey.
I'd really like to thank Chris Warner for talking about OT systems and the importance of understanding how your OT and IT systems talk to each other, and whether your OT systems can still function if the IT system goes down. This infrastructure continuity is important not only for the rail industry, but for most of the 16 critical infrastructures in general. Unfortunately, as Chris pointed out, there's a serious shortage of cybersecurity experts in OT. Hopefully, that can be mitigated in the coming years. Hey, if you're enjoying Error Code, tell a friend. I'm sure there are other people out there who like narrative information security podcasts. And I'd really like to hear from you. DM me at robertvamosi@infosec.exchange on Mastodon and tell me what you like and even what you don't. I've got some great stories coming up, including a discussion of our gas and water pipelines and, of course, more IoT. Subscribe today. I don't want you to miss out.